Hey, my name is Habib Ahmed, and you're listening to Pakcord. In each episode of this podcast, I bring on different guests for all sorts of discussions, and we all have one thing in common: Pakistan. In this episode, we want to shine a light on teen mental health. In around June of this year, 2020, 3 teenager suicides took place, one after another. All of these suicides were linked by authorities to a popular video game called Playerunknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG. The Pakistan Telecommunications Authority, PTA, responded by putting a temporary ban on the game on July 1st, calling it addictive and a waste of time. The ban was lifted a few weeks later, but it had already started a wave of discussions on the internet. I'm going to read out a Gulf News article, which will be linked in the episode's description. The article reads, "In Pakistan, concerns over the impact of PUBG have mounted after 18-year-old Shahryar was found hanging in his house in Lahore on June 30th. He had apologized to his friend and PUBG partner in a suicide note, and his brother, Shoaib, confirmed that Shahryar was a PUBG addict. A similar incident had taken place in late June when 16-year-old Mohammad Zakaria reportedly committed suicide by hanging himself after missing a task assigned in the game. Local media reported that a mobile phone was found on his bed with the PUBG game still running. The father confirmed his son's obsession with the game. The police claimed it was purely a case of addiction, as the boy used to play PUBG game for several hours a day. The police, in a letter to the IGP, said that excessive violence could trigger aggressive behavior. The addiction to complete missions causes agony and anxiety and results in depression and stress, the local media reported. The temporary ban sparked a debate on social media in Pakistan, with many saying it was a right move. Salma Khalid Khan, a schoolteacher, said that she wholly supports the ban. "I think it should be banned permanently. It's a good decision by the government. The horrible and violent images in such games could have adverse effects on the young minds," she said, adding that she would never allow her kids to play such games. However, avid gamers voiced their concerns that banning the game is an extreme step and that it's just a game, nothing illegal. Azim Haq, who has been playing video games for over 30 years, said, "I have played action games, adventure, sports, horror, and all kinds of games, and I never felt sick or psychologically unstable because I know it's just a game." Another gamer, Fahim Siddiqui, says, "If a child goes to the extreme of killing himself, there must be something more serious going on in his life than a game." He lamented that kids often divert all attention and time to games and gadgets when their parents don't have enough time for them. That ends the article. This entire topic of whether games are good or bad is well discussed in the US and many Western countries, but it hasn't been discussed much in Pakistan. This might be the first few set of incidents that might have brought it to the mainstream media. A lot of parents are obviously concerned. Are games good or bad? Are they too addictive? Are their kids getting negatively influenced by them? What is the answer? Our special guest for this episode is Aisha Sanober. Aisha is a child psychiatrist in Pakistan, and she is one of very few psychiatrists in the country who have specialized in child psychiatry. Through her expertise, Aisha is trying to bring greater focus towards the mental health of our youth in Pakistan. So in this episode, we want to answer one primary question. Are video games a problem here, or is it something else? And what can we do as parents and children to mitigate this issue? So what do you think is actually happening here? Is it an addiction to video games? Is maybe that's a piece of the overall puzzle? Or is it something completely different?
I would like to call it tip of an iceberg. So PUBG is just a tip of an iceberg. There's a lot more that's going on here. So teen suicide rates are higher globally. And if you talk about US, around 5,000 young people, they die by suicide every year.
Every year.
And in US, it has become the second leading cause of death in young people. And worldwide, it's around the third cause. In Pakistan, the problem is that we don't have good registry, we don't have good research studies. So there's no as such data that would tell us the national, picture of what's happening or mortality rate. So PUBG is just a scapegoat. Like, for example, I was just reading this article. In 16th century, people were actually worried about this thing that people were carrying in their hands where they could just gain knowledge, and they thought it was just ruining their brains, and they were talking about books.
Hmm.
And now it's technology, it's gadgets. But what we really are missing here is that there's also pandemic, there's COVID, there's homeschooling, there's domestic violence has gone up. There's everyone is stressed. Parental stress is high.
Mm-hmm.
Automatically translates into child stress.
Hmm.
Not everyone binges on media and games and technology, and not everyone who binges try to harm themselves or kill themselves.
Yeah.
So we also have to look at this spin that, of course, if someone is doing that, there must be an individual reason. It's never a linear path. It's never one thing leading to another thing. So it's a very complicated matter that needs to be looked into.
So just to add to that question, just to put it as an example, right? Let's say कि मैं बच्चा हूँ, about 17, 18 years old. I might be playing PUBG maybe 2 hours, but my neighbor might be playing PUBG every day, maybe 10 hours a day. And he's using that as a way to kind of avoid studying and avoid spending time with his family. Is the PUBG actually the issue, you think? Or is that basically the cause or the effect?
See, anything that goes into extreme is harmful.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about moderation, but then there are also newer studies telling us that a lot of focus on screen time and on like cyber world to prevent mental health disorders among teenagers is not a very effective use of time. So obviously there's something else that goes on. We have given a very good example that someone who's playing it for 2 hours and someone who's playing it for 10 hours, isn't it obvious that there's a lot more that's going on? For example, the child who's playing for 2 hours, why is that child being able, is able to stop her or himself? So parental control is there, probably, the way parents are modeling their behavior, and there's very healthy relationship with the technology at home. I don't know. I'm just thinking about all these reasons.
Right.
Versus a child is spending 10 hours on screen, and no one is stopping the child. Then obviously it's not PUBG, because we really have to see, Habib, that all of these games, they like people who have developed these games, they've done their homework. They exactly know how they can cause into the psychology of teenagers. They exactly know at what level they really have this power to kick the dopamine up in the brain. So this is a very well thought, well planned industry. You really have to see that why are we letting our children, our teenagers, be exploited by them? Because they will exploit. Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Or वैसे, again, continuing this hypothetical scenario. So my neighbor plays 10 hours of PUBG. अगर government ने ban कर दिया, then what do you think is happening now? Let's say they haven't done anything to harm themselves, but maybe there's clear signs of depression and mental illness. क्या उनका मसला हल हो गया? क्या वो अब उनकी mental illness थोड़ी कम हो गई है because of the government ban?
Absolutely no. This is my opinion. Absolutely no. But you know how US is talking about banning like guns and everything, which
we have a huge
legit,
shooting problem over here.
Which is completely legit.
Yeah.
But we do know that underlying that whole school shooting violence, there's significant psychopathology that is playing a role. But and even if you talk about US is struggling. I think the last I checked was that US has around 5,000 child psychiatrists. I'm not really sure, but they are also struggling. They don't have enough workforce. So really, like it's very easy to pick up a cause and then just blame everything onto it. And because it's an easy thing to do, right? People for the longest reasons blame sugar for hyperactivity because that's the easiest thing to do, because there is a problem, right? There is hyperactivity, there is behavior problem, but you have to blame it.
Yeah.
Like blame it to the parent, bad parenting, blame it to sugar, but it really is not about these things. These are all very immediate or precipitating factors that we focus on. We really have to look at the larger picture that where a child operates in.
You shed a little bit of light on the US issue. As you know, and most of the audience is probably aware, there's a mass shooting problem in general in the US. There's a lot of availability, a lot of access to guns. And then every time this happens, there's often a debate that opens up, कि guns को ban करना चाहिए कि नहीं. And especially the last several years when this topic actually opened up, the people who support gun rights have often pointed to the video game industry. So there's a lot of finger pointing to different industries.
Hmm.
Every industry wants to blame the other industry. Obviously, there's a commercial reason for it because everybody wants to bring in profits. But it's interesting that nobody's asking the psychiatrists over here. Nobody's really asking them, "Ke iska hal kya hai?"
And I mean, it never happens overnight. No one, no child. I mean, I was talking to my nephew. He's turning 17. I just wanted to get his insight into this topic, and he was very excited about this. And then he was like, it never happens overnight, and I agreed with him. Yes. And also, I think it's important for us to reflect that how would we feel if a teenager or a child comes to us and says, I want to harm myself. I'm so depressed. I'm so anxious.
Yeah, and I was going to ask further to this actually. जो लोग समझते हैं, खास तौर पे parents, obviously they're still trying to get a grasp of mental illness, and a lot of them might be thinking कि बच्चों को परेशानी क्या है? Why are kids so worried nowadays? Why are kids getting depressed? What reason do they have? Do you have any stories to share? Maybe some anecdotes on examples of clear depression that you have seen possibly in teenagers today in Pakistan? And then that's number one. And then number two would be what are the obvious signs that parents can look for?
Oh, it's interesting because I am also like asked that बच्चों की psychiatrist, as I initially said, बच्चों की psychiatrist, बच्चों को क्या मसले होते हैं जो बच्चों की psychiatry 2 साल की training है ये. So I think it's important for us to know what is normal in order to say that this is not normal. Like we don't know what is the right way, what is the normal way of डांटना कितना है या कितने rules करने हैं, कितने घंटे screen time दें. So जब normality का ही नहीं पता होता तो फिर abnormality जो है उसको समझना और मुश्किल होता है. Also the fact that how in our culture sadness is supposed to be bad. We're not supposed to get angry. We're not supposed to cry when like we are okay laughing in front of people, but crying is not okay. It's seen as a sign of weakness. So we tend to brush things under the carpet, and उसी सारे culture में चीजें miss हो जाती हैं. And similar thing has happened to sex. Similar thing has happened to drugs and abuse. That don't talk about it. Hush, hush, hush. Like abuse, sexual abuse, no. There's absolutely no way we're going to talk about it. Drugs के बारे में अगर हम बात करेंगे, so we are putting ideas in children. The same thing is around depression and suicide, teen suicide. So the very common myth is that if we talk about suicide to a child or a teenager, that means we are putting ideas in their head.
If you think about it, it will happen.
Which is not true. This is a very interesting. It's very interesting that you said this because this is at a very developmental level. This 4 to 5 year old child thinks this way that if I think something bad is going to happen to my parent, and let's say if the parent has fallen sick, the child will feel guilty about it because this is called magical thinking. But that happens at the age of 4 to 5 years. But that is also happening collectively at a societal level. We are so scared of words. We are so scared of the power that we have given to our thoughts and words is crazy. It's very hard. Very, very hard for teenagers nowadays to navigate their lives in this world. So there is parental expectations, and parents are mostly like they have their own sets of baggage there, and so in midst of that, when the child is struggling, the parent doesn't understand, or let's say there's no room for having any conversation with anyone. So अब मैं कहना नहीं चाहती understandable, but समझ में आता है कि बच्चा, why does बच्चा turn into all of these things? So when you ask about let's say symptoms, if you see that the teenager has become quieter, sleeping habits different हुई हैं, eating habits different हुई हैं, irritability. So teenage जो depression है, it's not much like कि उदास हो जाना. It's very much like irritability, talking back, and defiance, and not enjoying things, spending more online time, TV ज़्यादा देखना. So attention concentration, grades कम हो रहे हैं. So these are all the signs and symptoms that can be picked
And I wonder how many of these issues in teenagers get worse and worse only because of the lack of relationship that they have with their parents. कई बार parents समझते हैं कि, we do enough by feeding them, and they forget about the actual social aspect of, interacting with their kids, meaning taking them out or spending time with them, asking them how their day was, kind of helping them change their schedule, not only asking them to change their schedule in terms of prioritizing work and study and, other important things along with fun and entertainment as well. तो कई बार ऐसा मुझे लगता है कि there's a gap, there's a distance between parents and kids nowadays.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm blaming it all onto the parents. They have also struggled, of course.
That's the other thing. Yeah. उनके अपने मसले भी होते हैं. Oftentimes adults, everybody's tied up in their own different worlds, right? Everybody's got problems of their own.
Absolutely. Because no one teaches them how to be a parent. No one, and there are a lot of people who don't even want to be parents in the first place. And it's especially very harder, it's harder for females because if a woman says that I don't want to be a mother, it's like unimaginable thing to say. And which is why it's very important that you've picked this up, Habib, that parenting starts even before the child is born. So pregnancy, even before the pregnancy, before conception, parenting starts right from there. Your attitude towards having a child actually drives your parenting practices and skills. So as I say, it's a very, very complex issue.
Yeah, chalo, let's say that now we are getting more aware of these issues, right? So accept kar liya ki ye masla hai in our country and in our society. What can we do about it?
I think it's also important for parents to know if they want to be parents in the first place. Well, it's a very deep thing that I've just said in a sentence. But if you are planning to have children, then it's important for you to, read up. And now there's excellent resources that has very detailed research and science behind those resources that tell you that do this in let's say third, fourth month of pregnancy, do this now, because that is actually going into the very critical point of brain development when we talk about the child. So there are very good resources there. And also in terms of managing their own stress, you really have to see, and there's a lot of research around it, that if the parent's anxiety or parental stress is treated, 50% of symptoms among children get decreased. So, and these are like all research-based findings that I'm saying. Wow. So parental stress is a very significant factor in driving what's going to happen to the child. And also, please, I urge parents not to look for easy answers. It's nice to blame something, that technology is doing that, perhaps friends are doing that, and, like bad influence is coming from there and that. You really have to see that complex issue is, if I give you an example, if you have to solve a problem, you can't solve a problem if you don't study the problem. You really have to master the problem in order to solve it. But what happens is we immediately jump into solutions. What is the solution? But have you even looked into the problem? That is also very important. And then I think this is, I must say, don't wait for that tipping point. So it's a way of living that we're looking at. If you're talking about PUBG, we're talking about technology, then we can't expect a child or a teenager to stop doing things that she or he has been doing for past 14 years. I mean, you really have to see, and there are a lot of YouTube videos around that, Habib, that people, like father or mother, like parents are just smashing their gadgets and children are crying. There's this whole lot of YouTube videos around that, and it's horrible. It's actually traumatizing the child. So we really have to model our own behavior. We can't ask them not to do things, and they see us doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So we also have to have a digital diet. I mean, yeah, you can call it a digital diet. You can have a digital plan. Let's say, over the weekend, we can have extra ice cream of whatever, like social media use of an hour or so. But the entire family has to do that.
Yeah, right. कई बार ऐसा होता है कि parents send their kids to the bedroom and tell them to go to sleep. And then the parents themselves are up till midnight or past midnight watching TV or, on the internet, working or, just watching Netflix, binging, whatever.
For that, I would say that, there are age appropriate restrictions as well. This technique would not work for a teenager, but let's say if the child is 3, 4, 5 years old, you tell that this is an adult territory, and you sleep by 8.
Right.
You can do all of these things when the child is relatively younger.
From what I gather from what you said, it seems like we all need to spend more time on self-reflection. I like what you said about understanding the problem, not just diving for solutions, right? It's a good idea to sit down and take a breath and reflect on your life, a few minutes every day dedicated to just bringing your life into focus and understanding how that's affecting your family. So that might be useful for parents to do. What about the children themselves? So teenagers, जो बेचारे आजकल उनको PUBG नहीं मिल रही, तो PUBG के बजाय I imagine they're just playing other video games nowadays. So I don't think the government's really solved any problem here.
Yeah, that's what my nephew was telling me, that he hates PUBG. But he was like, well, I'll tell you what people would do. So instead of playing 4 hours of PUBG, they'll play some stupid game for an hour and 4 different games for 4 hours. I'm like, okay. And then he was also talking about how people are actually earning through PUBG, which was, again, something that I didn't really know. And then I looked up that someone from Pakistan only who has been involved with PUBG online tournaments is very upset with what has happened. So to start with, if someone is telling you, any friend of you, I'm talking to teenagers here, any friend of you or your sibling, anyone is like, I wish I was not alive, I wish I was not born, things like this, please don't make fun of them. It's very important that peer support is very positive in terms of teen depression. And what happens is that teenagers, they end up bullying, and it's almost seen as a weakness, and then they start mocking these individuals. So please don't do that. If there's a reason, if someone is saying this, you don't have to dwell into the reason. Of course, this is not your thing to do, but don't at least make fun of people who are actually suffering. Second, please try to talk to someone. It doesn't have to be someone from the family. I don't know how would this be taken, but it's very important, Habib. I think you also need to reiterate the fact that one good connection, it's all research-based. It doesn't have to be both parents, Amma, Abba. Just one good adult relationship, attachment with a teenager, with a child, actually works out best. So it's also important for students, for teachers, for seniors to have that attachment. It doesn't have to be like, clingy attachment, but someone that they can go to. So if you know anyone who you think can be your mentor, who you think, can guide you, why not? I mean, I'm not saying that immediately just go to a professional. If things are bad, of course you should. But it's very important for even teenagers to develop those connections. What happens is that we lose that trust in midst of all of this media hype, negative hype, that, it's just a significant, जितना generation gap है, उससे ज़्यादा हमने create कर लिया है because of this whole negative media hype. So I think it's important for them, for teenagers, to connect to adults who they really trust, but also let your parents know don't trust into strangers just right away. So that is important. And also, you can have honest conversations with your family. If you think there's a problem, you can have those honest conversations. But Habib, to be honest, this can't be just done by addressing to teenagers. For this, it has to be like the entire family.
The entire family, yeah.
Like, let's say अगर आज कोई teenager जाके suddenly decides to talk about whatever with the family, and the parents are like, what the hell are you talking about? So it's the entire family that has to
make the change. Say, and then one last question would be, actually, ये मैंने पहले इसके बारे में सोचा नहीं था, लेकिन I think a huge factor along with this might also be loneliness. So I don't know, I don't have any numbers on the degree of loneliness that exists in Pakistan, but I know in America over here it's a big problem, and loneliness is a reason for a lot of mental health issues. उसका मसला ये होता है कि ये नहीं कि necessarily लोग अकेले रह रहे हैं. Loneliness is not the same thing as being alone, right?
Absolutely.
You could still live with your whole family, with your parents, and still be lonely. And the reason for that might be you don't have a good relationship with your parents, or you're not, आप अपने माँ बाप को दोस्त की तरह नहीं समझते. You don't have good confidence in friends, and you don't have any friends in general. So there's a lot of, I think, teenagers that go through that. What do you think they can do possibly? So they might be going to these digital platforms like video games for 8 to 10 hours a day as a means of escape. But maybe at the end of the day, they don't really feel happy about it. यार मैंने क्या time ज़ाया किया सारा दिन, पूरा हफ्ता मैंने कुछ नहीं किया.
So again, it's when we're talking about loneliness, it's about not being able to develop those meaningful connections. But there's a reason why someone is not able to do that, right? The whole idea of developing relationships, the brain is supposed to be wired that way. The brain is wired, and all of these social emotional learning comes right from 1 to 2 years of age. उसी एज से ही जो है ये आपका जो ब्रेन है, it starts wiring in a certain way. So to be able to make those connections, it's also important कि आपने बचपन से किस तरीके से बच्चे को रेस किया है. And this reminds me of this argument that for, let's say 2 साल के बच्चे को you have given a tablet, and then like सारा दिन उसी पे ही rhymes and whatnot, and that child ends up playing 10 hours की PUBG because that child feels lonely at the age of 14. So do you see the connection? Because उसके brain में वो जो वो जो wire develop होनी थी social skills की, वो तो हुई ही नहीं. Habib, it's also important to find out why is the child feeling lonely. So there could be social anxiety, and I'm not saying disorders. I'm talking about just socially being anxious. There could be self-esteem issues. There could be any self-confidence issues. There could be bullying. So this loneliness also is something reflecting upon more, something more substantial behind it. Loneliness जब घर पे भी बात आ रही है तो फिर वो वही है कि communication घर पे नहीं है. So we don't teach our children how to express their emotions, how to talk about emotions. We don't teach them the names of emotions. So slowly and gradually वो फिर loneliness इसी तरीके से जो है वो बढ़ती आ रही है. A lot goes into making someone socially isolated or feeling lonely. So I don't know if I should be mentioning this, but this just reminded me of Joker, that movie. It was all about loneliness. It was. I mean, I'm giving a very, very severe example, but it just reminded me of Joker. But we do know that there were so many things wrong and it was not just one person to be blamed. There were structural problems, inequalities, there's health disparities, bullying, and so many things. So even loneliness is designed.
Yeah, I find it very interesting you mentioned that, because I remember when this movie Joker came out, there was actually a lot of controversy over that, even here in the US, because people were like, Joker is a very famous supervillain. So the fact that we tried to, the Hollywood tried to humanize this villain, and they tried to show us like what actually happened inside his mind, what was actually going through his head, what experiences was he having before he turned into the supervillain that he is known as today. A lot of audience members, a lot of people in the audience did not really like that. And it shows just how many flaws we have in the US social system as well. Over here, people are also uncomfortable with these types of discussions, even today. So it's not just an issue in Pakistan कि हम mental illness से डरते हैं, हम उसके बारे में बात नहीं करना चाहते. It's also still an issue over here. People are afraid to just speak about mental illness. And these are just fictional characters that we're speaking of. These are not real people. It's just a comic book. और फिर भी लोग इतने...
But it's interesting that because this reaction of people is something that I wasn't really aware of. Hollywood is working towards changing the narrative of villain and stereotype people. So, but it's very interesting how people were not okay with Joker, but okay with Disney movies. Interesting.
Yeah, right. The strange phenomena we see in Disney movies, especially, right?
Yeah.
And Disney is trying to change those now. Like a lot of movies from pre-2000s in Disney movies have been about rebellion. बच्चे भाग जाते हैं घर से, and that's completely okay. and now we growing up, we see issues in that.
Just my friend was in US and he went to watch this movie Joker with his friends, and all of his friends were African American. And the perspective that he gave me was something very eye-opening to me. He was like, my friends were saying that, imagine if this person was an African American. I was like, whoa, wow.
Yep.
Completely changes the narrative.
Yeah. And it's very true. Actually, यहाँ पे it's not just about African Americans, but even about us. अगर यहाँ पे कोई हादसा होता है and some Pakistani, background person has done something terrible, right? Then the entire issue comes to Pakistan or Muslims in general, oftentimes.
So here we go. Here we go. So we tend to blame, because these are all mental shortcuts.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what government has done to PUBG. So that's a mental shortcut.
Yeah.
Just blame it.
It's a distraction. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But oftentimes there's an over-analysis if it's a white person over here. We often see that. Okay, yada, there must have been something going on. What can we do about mental illness? That's when people are a little bit more comfortable speaking about mental illness.
But with my child psychiatry hat on, I also have a trouble with that notion, because like if a white person, let's say, or a child shoots in school, the whole focus is on mental health. So that is, they're probably, protecting the race in a way, but it's also giving very bad narrative of mental health to the media, that, oh, this is what mental illness looks like, that you just go on and shoot people.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. And I wonder how many people are afraid to go for a mental evaluation because of these types of things, right? They don't want to be categorized in the same bucket as shooters. People who have done other horrible things, because the stigma that we have about people who are mentally ill because of Hollywood movies and headlining news is completely distorted right now.
Absolutely. I'm going to share my article with you. I've written about this, that how do you create these stigmas, and if you talk about violence and mental illness, I think it's almost less than 10% of violence acts that are associated with psychiatric disorders. Less than 10,
wow.
Or perhaps even lesser than that.
Lastly, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, Aisha is one of very few child psychiatrists in Pakistan. I asked her how she felt about this and whether there is a shortage of psychiatrists in the country overall.
So this is not just Pakistan, Habib. This has been a problem, the shortage of child and adolescent psychiatrists globally. So if we just speculate the number based on whatever WHO has said, WHO says that it's around 10 to 20% of children are actually experiencing some kind of mental illness in the world. Then with that number, one child psychiatrist is responsible for around 20 million children in Pakistan.
Wow.
So हम सुबह शाम हर वक्त भी मरीज देखते रहें, we're never going to be enough. And again, the problem is that it's 5 years of MBBS, and then there's 4 years of adult psychiatry training, and then there is 2 years of child psychiatry training. So it takes a lot of time to do that. And in Pakistan, there was not even a single institute that was training child and adolescent psychiatrists up until 2016. So we don't have training, we don't have understanding. People are actually, like they asked me that, child psychiatrist क्या होता है? Like बच्चों को क्या नफ्सियात का मसला हो सकता है? So there's no understanding of child mental health. So the numbers are not enough.
तो यहाँ पे इस प्रोफेशन की तरफ ज़्यादा अटेंशन क्यों नहीं आ रहा लोगों को? Are there a lot of people not going for child psychiatry in general? What do you think?
There are only around 600 adult psychiatrists in Pakistan. That is also not an enough number. The problem with psychiatry is, Habib, that in medical schools in Pakistan, they don't teach psychiatry. Doctors who are graduating, they do not have any, let's say, competencies in mental health and psychiatry. And then these doctors end up becoming GPs and consultants, and there's a lot of stigma. So, वो understanding ही नहीं है at every level. And also, when we're talking about child psychiatry and child mental health, there are a lot of layers, and it's a very complicated matter. And like there's social issues involved, there's parenting, there are education sectors involved. So when we're talking about child mental health, it looks like, or it sounds like an alien thing, because यहाँ पे तो basic rights की ही बात जब हम करते हैं, या even जैसे पोलियो को ही हम eradicate नहीं कर सके हैं, तो child mental health is something very sensitive. It comes a process. Okay.
We're not there yet, basically.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this session with Aisha Sanober. You can find links to follow her on her blog and social media in this episode's description. If you have any questions or comments regarding the podcast, feel free to reach out to us anytime at hello@pakcord.com or DM us on our Instagram @pakcord. We'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves and take care of your families. Thank you, Aisha.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.